Hello, everyone. So many tournaments going on right now. Um, and this one is a meta analysis of the tournament going on in Madrid in a few days' time. I've gotten hold of all the lists. Achilles was nice enough to send them to me, and Hano is going to come and talk to us on this channel once the tournament is done. About at least the top five of the lists, I guess. We'll do like a top five. So this is my predictions, my analysis, what's going on, what are we seeing, what am I seeing with this, and as per usual, this is just it's my opinions. I do the list rankings that you guys have gotten sort of used to. I hope this isn't too noisy. The weather's turned quite nice in Denmark, so I'm in my garden right now. And always, when I look at what's happening in Spain, I'm always baffled because the Spanish do stuff that I would never do here. Um, so I'm really chuffed about having this look into their meta. Let's go and see what it is that they're doing, because again, they're doing stuff that's quite different. So it is the meta of Ville de Madrid, and here we go. The event itself is 1,000 points. You can use a single theatre platoon. It's got right now 58 players. I think that is still ongoing. I think they are going to reach approximately 60 players. Um, and as I understand it, they play 3 games, and then they have a finale for those who are in the top bracket, um, which is kind of a cool way to set it up, isn't it? I like that. Um, there are some mission changes from the rulebook, although all of the mission pack is in Spanish, and my Spanish is miserable at best. So I can glean a little bit of what's going on, but not that much. Mostly the missions they've taken are from just the standard rulebook missions and a few extra from the WTC pack, and they've made a few small changes. That's it. Um, so that is. I've got some people partying on the road next to it. Right. Now, looking through 58 lists was no easy task. Let me tell you that. But I managed to do it. I did it in one day. And this is the order dice spread. It goes from 19 to 18 order dice, the average being 14.3. There's a surprising number of lists that are very low for a 1,000-point order dice list. So we have 4 lists in the 9 to 10 bracket and 11 lists in the 11 to 12 bracket. That's very low for me. Predictably, we have a lot of lists in the 13 to 14 bracket and in the 15 to 16 bracket. And then in the 17 to 18 bracket, we have a huge number of 18 order dice lists, actually. A lot more than we have in the 17 order dice list. There was only like one list that had 17 order dice, so, and we're not seeing any above that. So we're not seeing any true horde spam lists at all, but we're seeing quite a lot of 18 order dice lists, so that is the upper limit here. We have a large chunk of German lists being taken, so 18 lists from Germany, including some very good players, I must say. So, and 6 Japanese lists, 11 American lists, only 8 Great British lists, and 7 Soviet lists. This is way lower than what I would have expected, but moving into theatre lists does change up the meta quite a bit. And this is apparently what is happening in Spain. As soon as they see theatre lists, they are moving away from Britain and Soviets a little bit and moving into Americans and German lists. We're also seeing 3 French lists, 2 partisan, 2 Polish, and 1 communist China. So the spread is not way off from what I would expect, but it does have a lot more German lists. Now, this can be 2 things. It can be that the competitive players in Spain are actually looking at Germany saying, right, this is what we're doing. Or it can be that the non-competitive players all want to play German. looking at what's happening with the individual nation, I suspect the latter, like that there's a lot of not competitive players playing Germany, but I don't actually know this for sure. If I look at this, just the Soviet lists, I look and I immediately think that there's a lot of really competitive players playing Soviets. So because most of the top range lists for me are actually Soviet lists. But that's the nation spread. A lot more American lists than I would have brought or thought anyway. Now, I've done, unlike what I usually do, I've actually looked at the individual nations here and like taken the major takeaways that I see from this. So from the German lists, I see a huge mix of theatres. There's not a lot of repetition in the theatre selectors, even though there's 18 theatres, which of course, because with Germany you have so many theatre selectors available to you, so there's a lot of things you can do. There is also a much lower than average order dice count. The order dice average for the German lists is 12.3, not 14.3. So it's much, much lower. And that's why I think that there's a lot of non-competitive players who are playing Germany for this event. There's many, which also tells me that there's a lot of non-competitive players. There's many really tooled up units, which has assault rifles, SMGs, LMGs, quite a lot of bought LMGs, and Panzerfausts. Now, this can be a good idea, but it can also just be a point sink where you're just putting a lot of points into that one regular unit that will die to any rifle shots. There's also quite a few very expensive lieutenants, which you don't need to bring. There's a lot of people bringing Waffen SS units, but not bringing Waffen SS inexperienced lieutenants. So people are buying deliberately, or because they're not competitive players, buying expensive lieutenants. Lots of Waffen SS units. That's the most common unit. Lots of shirkers, even though there's the nerf, people are still bringing the shirkers. They're still apparently worth it in Spanish eyes. Also, lots of multi-rocket launchers, which I guess would be pretty normal when you were seeing Germans. The Howling Cow, the Nebelwerfers, they're just pretty much everywhere, right? For vehicles, I was expecting to see a lot of the darker version Panzer III, but I'm not seeing. There are a few. There's even one like that spams Panzer IIIs, which is a really cool list. Unfortunately, it doesn't make my cut for the top 5, but it's pretty close. But there's a lot of light autocannon vehicles, so the Panzer Lux or the 250/9, I think, that has the light autocannon turrets. There's a lot of those. The list ranking for me is low on average, so it's between 1 and 3.5, but that's pretty low. And the lists to watch for me is Achilles. I am guessing that he brings one of those mixed bag units, and I can sort of tell or guess which one it is, but I'm not absolutely certain, so I'm not like giving that away. But Achilles is a player to watch anyway, and his lists have worked really well for Germany, surprisingly well. Then we have the Japanese lists. For Japan, Burma and Guam, I'm going to move places right now because other people need a little bit of peace and quiet here. So I'm going inside. Just follow me along here. Right. I hope you can see me again. Right. For Japanese, we have a lot of Burma and Guam selectors. And the common feature for all these is that there's a lot of boots on the ground. There's a lot of bodies in these not American, Japanese lists. Not necessarily true horde lists, all of them, but they do have that element of a lot of infantry units, a lot of infantry bodies as well. There's a weird tendency for people to take the dual weapon squads with LMGs, and I don't really understand that. That is for theme, not for winning competitions, I guess, because people are actually buying those LMGs. which are not worth it. But interestingly enough, there's a lot of light mortars as well, which is an interesting build for Japanese. I'm also seeing regular suiciders, which is very unusual. For me, it's usually the inexperienced suiciders to make them cheap, or the veteran ones to make sure that you can run into a hail of gunfire and actually reach that tank, maybe try to survive that, right? Of course, we see a lot of bamboo units, but it's not universal. It's not everywhere. For me, the list rankings are between 2.5, so more thematic lists than competitive lists, but with still can compete. And 3.5, which are fairly strong average competitive lists. And the person to watch here is Russell Wright, who's bringing a very thematic Sugarloaf Hill list. Then we have the American lists, and the takeaways for me with the American lists is that the Normandy selector and the 6th Corps selectors are the most popular ones by far. They're mostly everywhere, and there's so many skirmishes in these American lists, like BAR equipped or rifle equipped regulars or veterans everywhere. But there are also quite a lot of not optimized choices that I see. So people bringing, for instance, a veteran Jeep that doesn't really have anything that it needs to transport. Maybe a lieutenant, but what do you want a veteran Jeep for with your lieutenant? Or bringing inexperienced first lieutenants, or taking anti-tank guns, fixed anti-tank guns. So a lot of choices that are, for me, speak about thematic choices more than competitive choices. And there are no Darker Stewards. Not a single one. There are stewards in the American lists, but they're all later versions than the early war Darker Stewards. For me, the list ranking in the American lists is between 2.5 and 3.5. So again, fairly average. And no players that I'm specifically watching in this group here, just because there are none of these players that I sort of are international high level competitive players from what I can see just looking through the players list. Then we have the British. The British mostly take the D-Day selector, although not universally. Most of the British tanks have double tanks. So in the D-Day selector and in Western Desert, you can take double tanks, and most of the British players have done so because why not? They're pretty good. There are surprisingly few Gurkhas, although there is like one Gurkha list that mainly relies on its Gurkhas. Even the other armies that could take more Gurkhas don't really, maybe take one Gurkha or two, but not like all Gurkhas. And there are no Darker Stewards again. On the other hand, there's really quite a lot of stubborn troops, Paras, picked for various armies here. For me, the list ranking goes from 2 to a 3.5. And the list to watch for me is, of course, Gervin's Burma Para-Gurkhas with a Lee as support. That list could easily go into the top bracket for me, just because Para-Gurkhas are really strong, and the Lee is a very interesting choice as well, although maybe too expensive for a 1,000-point game. So that is one I'll watch. If we're looking at the Soviet lists, the main takeaway for me is that there's a surprising lack of them. There's not many Soviets lists from what I've seen from other competitions, and that speaks to me of a theme being more important than competition for this Madrid Open competition. So there are very few Soviets here, especially because the Soviet lists, the selectors are really strong. Some of the strongest. Go and watch my videos with Alistair on the strongest theatre selectors. Stalingrad and Silo Heights, the strongest selectors by far of most selectors that I can come up with. But there are, of course, some selectors which have really interesting special rules as well. Most people bring the Stalingrad or Silo selector. There's like one that isn't either Stalingrad or Silo. Um, and I'm seeing surprisingly few dog mines, maybe because of those selectors. Very few stewards as well. Um, Lots of boots on the ground again, so lots of bodies, and almost into horde territory for many of the lists, and lots of HE. We even have one of these lists that for me is a true leaf burrower list, which has 6 HE shots in the list, which is crazy, really strong. There's also a good amount of flavors here, so not true barbecue lists with 5, 6 plus flavors, but 3 or 2 in each list is quite common. So strong lists, very strong lists here. For me, many of the Soviet lists are 4 lists, so really strong competition lists. And Shirkers make an appearance here as well. I don't, since the nerf, I don't take Shirkers anymore. But I do know some international players, Manuel, who do. And I'm guessing one of these is Manuel's. So the lists to watch here is Manuel and Carlos Moros. I don't know which list they are, but I have guesses. So the list ranking for me goes from a 2 to a 4, and many of them are 4s, possibly even more than 4s because they're really, really good lists here. So once we get to my predictions, you'll see that a lot of the top 5 are actually the Soviet lists here. Takeaway for France and Poland. I lumped these in together because both of them have cavalry appearing. There's also a good spread of the French selectors, so there's like one of each. So there's one Free French, one Vichy French, and one Defense of France. And a surprising number of AA guns, so autocannons in the artillery slot. I would normally just take howitzers, but some people find them useful. And I can see this as being a meta thing for Spain, that autocannons are a thing. Most people like to have at least one autocannon in their army. Cavalry makes an appearance both in a French list and, of course, in the Polish lists. Surprisingly, the Polish lists also have boots on the ground, which means that they don't have all cavalry. So we don't see an all cavalry Polish list here, which is a little surprising for me. But still, the lists are pretty good, all of them, and for me the list ranking goes between 3 and 3.5, so competitive list to strong competitive lists. If we take a look at the remaining, then it's the Partisans and it's China. And I lumped these in together because they have sort of the same feel to them. They are the weird armies that have weird special rules. Both of them have lots of boots on the ground. Both of them have pistolero units, which is units that can take a lot of pistols, so a lot of tough fighter, and can push up somehow. Now, for the Partisans, of course, we see the Marquis units being utilized with pistols. They're green, they're inexperienced, but and can take a lot of pistols, so a lot of tough fighter. And for the Chinese, it's the guerrillas, veteran guerrillas with pistols. For me, these units, these lists are 3s to 3.5s, very strong showing for the Partisans and for China. And the people to watch there will, of course, be Alistair of the Spanish WTC team and Hanno of the Spanish WTC team. Again, I don't know who is bringing what, but I'm guessing one of these guys will bring the Chinese. My guess is on Alistair, because I know he has a Chinese army. So, my prediction for the top 5 will be the 18 order dice Red Army Chinese list with the Guerrilla Pistolero spam. That is a strong list. That's a really strong list, and most people will not be able to deal with it. I am guessing that whoever plays this, whether it's Hanno or Alistair or another player, could bring this to a lot of victories. 15 order dice, 6th Corps Americans, which has barbecue, and then dual MGMCs, which is the ones that can shoot and scoot. So as soon as you shoot, you can actually move back. You can sort of make a recce move away. That is a really strong anti-tank list. So for me, that list could also end up in the top 5. It's a really well-designed list for me. And then comes all the Soviets. We have the 18 Order Dice Silo Heights Leaf Blower list that I mentioned earlier with 6 HE shots. Crazy, 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 crazy. Really strong. It's got 2 in the tank slots, so SU-76s or something that has howitzers. It's got 2 howitzers and 2 mortars, so 6 HE shots. Crazy strong. And then we have the 18 Order Stalingrad that has a double of everything good, and then Stewards, really strong as well. And a 16 Order Silo Heights with a Strafbat Horde that has mortars and Stewards in support. Both of these could easily end up in the top 5. So those are my predictions for what will do well. I will get back to these predictions once I go over the results with Hanno. To everyone going to Madrid, God, I'm envious. I really wanted to go, but for me, it's in the middle of the exam period, and my economic funds are limited, as is my time. So everyone going, good luck. Have a wonderful tournament. It looks absolutely amazing. Enjoy it, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.